Elellanar Hastings had been watching him for 3 weeks. Every night, from the glass-walled corner office on the 30th floor, she sat alone with the city, glowing beneath her and the security monitors glowing in front of her, coffee in hand. Mind sharp, instincts awake. The janitor's name was Garrett Sullivan. He arrived every night at exactly 11:02 p.m. Always the same routine, same quiet rhythm, same careful steps, same worn uniform and lowered gaze. At first, she hadn't noticed him at all. Hastings Technologies employed dozens of night staff. Janitors were meant to be invisible. But 3 weeks ago, right after the Morrison contract leaked, something shifted. Elellanar had started staying late, watching, waiting, and Garrett didn't quite fit. He cleaned thoroughly but without hurry, like a man stretching time rather than racing against it. He emptied executive trash cans, vacuumed carpets, wiped glass walls that reflected success he would never taste. And then, every single night, at 11:45, he did something no janitor had any reason to do. He went to the archives room on the 15th floor, and he carried a black duffel bag, not a cleaning bag, not supplies, something heavier, something guarded. Elellanar leaned closer to the monitor now as she had every night, her coffee long cold, her jaw tight. There he was. Garrett pushed his cart past reception, paused, glanced over his shoulder, then turned down the quiet hallway that led to the old archives, an outdated room no one visited since the company went digital. She watched him stop at the door, watched his shoulders tense, watched his hand tremble just slightly as he reached for the handle. Why would a janitor need access to the archives? The door opened. Garrett slipped inside, and the hallway went empty again. Elellanar exhaled slowly, the fear curling tight in her chest. She told herself this was about security, about protecting the company, about stopping whoever had cost them millions. But somewhere beneath the silk blouse and the weight of her title, she knew the truth. She was afraid of what she might find, afraid of being right, and worse, afraid of being wrong. Hastings Technologies after midnight felt hollow. Fluorescent lights hummed over empty corridors, the kind of artificial silence that only existed when ambition went home for the night. Elellanar sat alone. City lights sprawled below her like a careless constellation. 7 years as CEO, 7 years since her divorce, 7 years since she had decided that power was safer than intimacy. The view was supposed to mean something. Instead, it mostly meant she worked while everyone else lived. She glanced at the security monitors again. 3 weeks ago, she would have ignored them. But 3 weeks ago, someone had leaked a confidential bid to their biggest competitor. 6 months of work, gone overnight. The board was furious, investors nervous, fingers pointing everywhere. Elellanar needed answers, and Garrett Sullivan had become a question she couldn't ignore. Every night, same pattern, same time, same bag. Tonight, she watched with sharper focus. At 11:45, Garrett appeared on the 15th floor camera. He paused, looked left, looked right, then pulled out a key. Elellanar's stomach dropped. Where did a janitor get a key to the archives? He slipped inside. The door closed. Elellanar stared at the empty hallway, pulse pounding. Enough. She pulled up the private investigator's report she'd ordered last week. She already knew it by heart. Garrett Sullivan, age 38, widowed. Wife deceased 2 years prior, Rebecca Sullivan. Car accident. Rainy November night on Interstate 90. One daughter, Grace, age 8. Employment history. Memorial Hospital janitorial. Lincoln Elementary. Hastings Technologies night shift. No criminal record. No financial red flags. On paper, he was invisible. But the PI's photos told another story. 2 nights last week, Garrett hadn't gone home. Instead, he'd driven 20 minutes out of his way to a cafe in the financial district. There he met a man in an expensive suit. One photograph showed Garrett sliding a manila envelope across the table. The man nodded and tucked it into his briefcase. Elellanar stared at the image, her chest tight. Corporate espionage. It made sense. A desperate man, a grieving widower, a child to support. Someone offering money in exchange for access. She should have called security. Should have involved legal. Should have ended this immediately. But something stopped her. Another photo. Garrett kneeling outside a school gate. Grace running toward him, smiling wide, arms open. Garrett catching her like she was the only thing holding him together. Elellanar closed the file. She was being soft. That was dangerous. But before she destroyed a man's life, she needed certainty. She needed to see what was in that bag. The decision came suddenly. Tomorrow night, she would go to the 15th floor herself. No investigators, no security, no intermediaries. If there was a traitor in her company, she would look him in the eye. And if she was wrong, she didn't know what that would mean. The clock read 12:58 a.m. Garrett would be leaving soon, heading home to his daughter, to whatever life he lived when he wasn't stealing from her company. Elellanar gathered her things and headed for the elevator, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. As she descended, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. A woman who had traded warmth for power, and was only now wondering what it had cost her. The next evening, Elellanar Hastings arrived at the office on time. But nothing felt normal. Her calendar was full, board calls, budget approvals, expansion forecasts. But her mind was locked on a single moment that hadn't happened yet. 11:45 p.m., 15th floor, archives room. She snapped at her assistant twice and apologized both times, something she rarely did. She ordered dinner she didn't touch, numbers blurred on her screen. When the sun finally dipped behind the skyline and the building emptied, the silence pressed in harder than usual. At 11:30, Elellanar locked her office door. She didn't take the elevator. The stairwell smelled like concrete and old air, emergency lights casting sharp white angles along the walls. Her heels echoed too loudly, so she slipped them off and carried them, her stockinged feet silent against the steps. This is ridiculous, she told herself. She was the CEO of a $500 million company, not a spy sneaking through her own building. And yet, she kept going. The 15th floor was dim, washed in green exit signs and distant streetlight. Somewhere far away, she could hear the low hum of a floor buffer. Garrett was still working. She reached the archives room. The door was unlocked. Elellanar slipped inside and turned on her phone flashlight. Dust motes danced in the beam. Filing cabinets loomed like silent witnesses. The air smelled of paper and time. She moved straight to the back corner. The black duffel bag was there, exactly where she'd seen it on camera. Her heart pounded as she unzipped it, bracing herself for flash drives, contracts, proof of betrayal. Instead, textbooks, business management, financial accounting, introductory programming, worn, highlighted, loved, notebooks filled with careful handwriting, practice problems, essay drafts, and at the bottom, sealed in plastic, a photograph. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile holding a newborn baby. On the back, faded ink read, Rebecca and Grace, 2 weeks old. A whole world. Elellanar's certainty collapsed into confusion. The lights flicked on. She looked up. Garrett Sullivan stood in the doorway, one hand on the switch, his face drained of color. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. I can explain, he said finally, his voice rough. I think you'd better, Elellanar replied, standing slowly. How long have you been watching me? 3 weeks. Since the Morrison contract leaked. I thought you were stealing from the company. Something flickered across his face. Dark humor, pain, resignation. And instead you found out I'm stealing an education. Using company resources without permission is still theft, she said, defaulting to her CEO voice. I know, he said quietly. I couldn't afford the electricity to run my laptop after Grace sleeps. The library closes at 8. The computers here still work. I thought, it wouldn't hurt anyone. He laughed without humor. I should have known I couldn't get away with trying to be more than what I am. That sentence hit harder than she expected. She really looked at him then. Bone-deep exhaustion, hands rough from chemicals, eyes worn thin by grief and hope existing side by side. Why business? She asked. My wife was an engineer, Garrett said. She worked here. 3 years ago, Elellanar stiffened. Rebecca? Yes, his voice softened. I never understood her work. She tried to explain, but it felt like another language. I think she got tired of translating her life for me, he swallowed. After she died, I found her journals. One entry said she felt alone in our marriage, because I couldn't meet her. Where she lived intellectually, Elellanar felt her throat tighten. "I'm doing this for Grace," he continued, "so I can help her someday, so she won't think her dad is just the man who empties trash cans. And because Rebecca deserved better than who I was." Elellanar searched her memory. "She worked under Douglas Mercer," she said slowly. "Infrastructure Division." Garrett nodded. "She reported accounting irregularities. Said Mercer was embezzling. Ice formed in Elellanar's stomach. She followed every proper channel," Garrett continued. "HR said she misunderstood the numbers. 2 weeks later, she was fired for performance issues." Elellanar leaned against a cabinet, dizzy. After Rebecca's dismissal, Garrett explained no company would hire her. Panic attacks followed. Sleepless nights. Savings vanished. The night Rebecca died, she'd been coming home from a call center interview. "The police said she was driving too fast," Garrett said, voice breaking. "But I think she was just tired of fighting." Silence filled the room. Elellanar felt something inside her fracture. How many people like her were there? She wondered aloud. How many did I never see? Garrett looked at her. "I came here because I hated this company. I wanted proof. I wanted her name cleared." "Did you find any?" Eleanor asked. "No," he said. "I checked everything." She was wrong. The admission crushed him. "She wasn't wrong about how she was treated," Elellanar said firmly. "That matters." Garrett looked at her like someone drowning offered air. The investigation took 3 months. Douglas Mercer was removed, not for embezzlement, but for retaliation, misconduct, and abuse of authority. HR policies were rewritten. A whistleblower protection program was implemented. Rebecca Sullivan's termination was officially overturned. Her record cleared. Elellanar attended the board meeting herself. Garrett was offered a scholarship funded by the company and an internship. He cried when she told him. Grace visited the office once, holding her father's hand, eyes wide at the city view from the 30th floor. "This was my mom's building," she whispered. "Yes," Elellanar said softly. "And now it's part of your story, too." A year later, Elellanar stood by the window again. But she wasn't alone. The city still glowed beneath, her beautiful and indifferent, but something inside her had changed. Power no longer felt like protection. It felt like responsibility.
She glanced at her desk.
A framed photo sat there now. Garrett, Grace, and a smiling woman whose name had almost been erased. Rebecca Sullivan. Some shadows didn't hide criminals. Some hid people trying to become more than their pain.